Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown. My name is Ron. I'm an alcoholic. How you all doing? Quick few announcements. We have Barefoot Bill going to do a AA history presentation. I think it's the following 2 weeks from now, second or third week from now. December 14th, we have Chris Raymer coming up from Texas. He's going to do a workshop all day with Chris Schroeder. It cannot take place in this room because of the holidays, so we're probably most likely going to be at Salem UCC Church. It's like a block from here. It'll start at like 10 a.m., run till 4, but the evening speaker, Chris, will be speaking here normally like we speak at our 8:30 meeting. You can find all this stuff on Facebook. If you go to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown, keep you informed, not only with this group, but what's going on in AA and in the tri-state area. People, if you have any events, any workshops, any anniversaries, please keep everybody notified and post them in there. It helps people never get bored in AA. And I always say, if you're bored in AA, I mean, you're missing it because there's something going on every single night of the week somewhere. And that's the beauty of Facebook. So take advantage of that if you can. We have flyers in the back. If you have any flyers, please bring them present, let everybody else know. Brian's going to come up here and share, and let's have some fun.
All right, good evening, everybody. Good to be here tonight. Good to be sober. Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Brian, and I am an alcoholic. This is a 1-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, 301 North Main Street, 830 in Doylestown, PA. The business meeting for this group meets right here every Saturday, 7 p.m. to 7:30. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teachings of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others may benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. If there's anybody that's new or from out of town that would like to introduce themselves on a first-name basis, so we can welcome you.
My name's Ed. I'm an alcoholic.
Ed, welcome.
Yeah, I'm an alcoholic.
Joe, welcome. Over there. Welcome. Corey, welcome. Mike, welcome. Carly, welcome. You get everything? Dan, welcome. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. When anyone with a working knowledge of the 12 steps and is willing to sponsor, please raise your hands. All right, so those are your sponsors. If you're new or if you're struggling or if you've been around for a while and you just want to get a little bit more involved, grab one of those people after the meeting and we'll help you get into the solution a little bit. Are there any announcements for the good of AA?
I'm an alcoholic.
Thank you.
Tomorrow, Full Road NAS is having their 41st anniversary from 6:30 to 8:30, 2 speakers. 6:30 so for celebration, 7:30 there's a meeting with 2 speakers at the St. John's Lutheran Church, 505 North Church Road, Hatboro. And on Monday, Lansdale at United Methodist Church, 300 North Broad Street, is having their anniversary meeting. Food and fellowship starts at 11 a.m. and at 12 o'clock they have the guest speaker.
Thanks, Mike. Yes.
Alcoholic Dave.
Dave.
So there's going to be an emotional recovery workshop. New perspective on living the 12 steps and applying them to your relationships. Good luck with that. December 7th, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at St. Michael's Lutheran Church, 2141 East Conference Street in Philadelphia. If anyone would like more information, I have a digital flyer that I can leave you in the after meeting.
Thanks, Dave. Anybody else? You get everything? Okay. A couple announcements from this group. We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of big books and CDs to help those who cannot afford them can put donations on the back table in the jar marked Big Book and CD donations. If you would like a CD of any speaker, past or present, please see me or Ron before or after the meeting. They are available free of charge. And with that, I believe Teresa's going to come up here and read the AA preamble.
I am Teresa. I'm an alcoholic. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And Daryl is going to come up and read the 12 steps of recovery.
My name is Daryl. I'm an alcoholic. These are the 12 steps. Step 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable. Step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4, made a searching and fearless more inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Step 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so will injure them or others. 10, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And Brian's coming back up to chair the meeting.
Okay, at this time, 7 tradition, every AA group will be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. This time we're going to pass around the basket. There are no dues or fees, but we do have expenses. Your contributions help us to cover the cost of rent, big books, CDs, workshops, the legendary Cronuts in the back, coffee. A reminder, we do record all speakers here. If you want to get a copy of the speaker, if you think somebody would benefit from the message that you hear tonight, you can get copies of the CD. Like tonight's speaker will be available next week, or you can also get it at our sister group. It's a big book study, Thursday nights at 7:30 up the street there at Salem UCC Church. There's absolutely no smoking on church property. It's the church's policy. It pretty much goes for all churches these days. So if you could please help us out with that, just keep the premise, nice and clean as you're coming and going from the meeting. Please be considerate of that. Help us out. Please take a moment to silence all cell phones and limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. And now to introduce our speaker. Oh, he's using the bathroom? Okay. That's fine. What else we got? Let's see. As Ron mentioned, this group does have a Facebook page and it has a website. It's a good way to stay informed of happenings. A lot of people post their celebrations and group happenings, so it's a good resource to have. You can stay informed of something every night. Go and find something to do. So again, we encourage you, if you have information on a celebration or a speaker that you have coming out, we encourage you to bring flyers in, post it to the Facebook page. With that, I'm going to introduce our speaker for tonight. Please help me welcome a good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group. Please welcome from the Mediterranean Group of Jerusalem, Israel. Please help me welcome Yisrael.
That was a poorly timed last visit to the bathroom, but Ron told me I could speak for as long as it took me to get here. So we're going to be out of here before they start church in the morning. Whatever time that is. I'm an alcoholic, a member of the Mediterranean Group, and my name is Yisrael Campbell. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for leading the meeting. Ron, thanks for the invitation to be here. Thanks to everyone that does service here and to the guys that picked me up and brought me here tonight from my sister's house in Havertown. Thank you very much. It is an honor and a privilege to participate in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I say it's an honor because everything that I have in my life today is because I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not all Alcoholics Anonymous. What I got here was far wider and broader than simply a cup with my name on it and a stack of Oreos. But what I have is because I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, because I've taken part in this process. And it's a privilege, and I say it's a privilege specifically using that word because it's the word that Dr. Silkworth used in discussing and describing one of his interactions with Bill Wilson, and where he writes, first he writes, I'll just back up a little bit, he writes, many years ago, one of the leading contributors of this book came under our care in this hospital, and while here he acquired some ideas which he put into practical application at once. And then he writes, and this is what I was referencing at first, later he requested the privilege of being allowed to tell his story to the other patients here, or the other patients, and then he writes, which is beautiful, here and with some misgiving, we consented. In other words, he thought it was a bad idea, but he figured, what the hell? How much possible damage can they do to each other? You know? And because of that, we're here tonight. Because Dr. Silkworth was there, and because Ebby went to Bill, and because Roland went to Ebby, and because. You know, we say that the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous was June 10th, 1935, when Dr. Bob stopped drinking. When Dr. Bob, the last day that Dr. Bob drank is actually June 10th. And that's the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is interesting because I would think, that Alcoholics Anonymous would have begun on the day that the first person in Alcoholics Anonymous stopped drinking. It would be Bill Wilson's anniversary, but it's not Bill Wilson's anniversary, it's Dr. Bob's anniversary, because we need two. Alcoholics Anonymous isn't something, in my experience, that is done by ourselves. We need that other person. The magic here happens when that second person gets sober. And the beauty of Alcoholics Anonymous and the strength of Alcoholics Anonymous is that, thank God, that's always going to be able to happen. That same thing that happened when Bill went to Bob's house that day, or when Bob came to Henrietta Sieberling's house, and Bill was there visiting from New York. You know, it's so many remarkable moments that took place so that we could be here eating, food that's going to kill us. Which I guess is one step better than in years gone by when we sat in rooms like this and smoked to kill ourselves, So we're moving in the right direction. And you gotta love a meeting where you can get 4,000 or 5,000 calories before the meeting starts. I'm just saying, I'm not judging. I'm just reporting. But it's remarkable, right? It's remarkable. You know the story. I'm not just going to go into the story for a minute, but you know the story, right? Bill's in Akron. The business deal falls through. That's drinking time for me. Right? I don't know. I got sober at 16. I never had a business deal fall through. Homework didn't get done. That's drinking time for me. You know what I mean? But he doesn't drink, right? He goes to the lobby, he looks to the bar, he hears the tinkling of the glasses and the laughing of the crowd, and I'm sure the warmth and the fellowship. And he looks at the phone booth with the church directory. He's a New York stockbroker. 99 times out of 100, a New York stockbroker in that situation goes to the bar. Along with 99 times out of 100 for any one of us. Right? he goes to the church director and he calls 10 people. The 10th priest. The last time a New York stockbroker talked to 10 priests in one day. Right? The 10th guy says, yeah, I think I got a number. He calls Henrietta Sieberling, and you know what she says? She says two things. Yeah, I know someone, and we've been praying for you. They were praying. They didn't know what to do with Dr. Bob. They were praying for a solution. Right? That's Saturday. Bob can't make it. He's passed out at the kitchen table in his Mother's Day gift to his wife. Sunday he goes, and you know what he said. I once heard his son speak. His son was in the back of that car, a young boy. And he heard his father say to his wife, to Anne, he said, we'll give this bird 15 minutes. Because he'd been reprimanded about his drinking. He'd been told that he was a problem drinker. He'd been told he shouldn't do what he was doing. But that's not what Bill did. Bill didn't talk about Bob. Bill talked about Bill. And that made all the difference. And so, from that day till this, Alcoholics Anonymous has existed. And the answer for the alcoholic has not been certain death. Certain embarrassing, shameful, humiliating death. Long. Right? You know what they say about us. We don't have happy childhoods, but we have long ones. Heard a guy say that one night. I thought, man, that's true. Right? And Sharon, I think Sharon Crane says, when an alcoholic goes to sleep sober, 10 people sleep better. That's true. So, in this tiny little wink of history, Alcoholics Anonymous has existed. Right? Let's back up a little to the first, I don't know if it's the first, it's an early well-known case. I want to talk for a minute about Noah, the ark guy. Not from a religious perspective, just from a cultural perspective, from a fact, from the idea that this is a story that has existed in human consciousness for somewhere between 3,500 and 5,000 years. You remember the story, right? Noah saved the world. Right? God said, build an ark. Cool. Kind of crazy. But Noah built an ark. Cool. Kind of crazy. And loads up 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. All his kids, his wife, their wives. Loads into the ark. Starts raining. Rains for 40 days. Everybody else dies. This entire world is destroyed outside of the people in the ark. Again, not from a religious perspective, just from a, wow, that must have been crazy. Right? That's like a long road trip. 40 days with all the survivors of Earth. And you know what Noah did? The first thing he did when he got back from saving the entire world, he planted a vineyard, got drunk, and naked in front of the kids. That's the Bible I just said to you. I'm not making this up. He planted a vineyard, right? Because he forgot to pack a couple bottles of wine, so he had to plant a vineyard and got drunk and naked in front of the kids. Sounds like alcoholism to me. From that day to this, there has been a window, a tiny, tiny window, where Alcoholics Anonymous has existed. And even still, the vast majority of alcoholics will die an alcoholic death. And even still, I don't care what the forewords say. I don't care if you're a mathematician or a statistician. I'm not interested in the statistics of how many people. In my experience, many people that will sit in these chairs will still choose to die an alcoholic death rather than to live a life based on spiritual principles, rather than to live a life based on service. So the fact that we're here tonight, the fact that we're sober, the fact that we're members of groups, I assume, where we are active in the service structure of Alcoholics Anonymous, from setting up these chairs, to picking up that food, to greeting, whatever we all did to be here tonight and to be of service to this group, puts us in the tiniest minority. Yes, 2 million alcoholics, sober alcoholics, great. But there's 20 million running around this country, if not the world. Just crazy numbers, right? So the fact that we're here is miraculous in and of itself to me. Because I'm a kid. I'm just a kid from the suburbs of Philadelphia. I'm just a kid that grew. I don't know if fear can be transmitted through breast milk. But if it can, it was in my case. I'm not blaming my mother for anything. I'm simply saying that the very first thing I remember is being afraid. The very first thing I remember is feeling different than everyone else. The very first thing I remember is feeling like I was in a room where everyone was looking at me. And for the longest time, that made me uncomfortable. For the longest time, it wasn't true. Now, it happens to be true tonight. Everyone happens to be looking at me. Outside the 5 or 6 people who are looking at their phone. I'm not going to pick on you any further. And I'm not thinking of anyone in particular. And I didn't even see anyone that I was referring to earlier, but I know someone is looking at their phone. I can't look at all of you at the same time. Someone in this room is looking at their phone. But that's okay, because you're here, you're sober, and anything can happen from there. I was uncomfortable from my very first moment that I remember, it seems, until I took my first drink. I took my first drink at 9 years old. I like to think that I waited. I could have used a drink on the way to kindergarten. No, seriously, 5 years I'm hanging out every day with the same woman. Suddenly she takes me to a room full of people my size and leaves me there. You can't tell me a shot of bourbon wouldn't have taken the edge off that. But I waited till I was 9. I had a drink, and I said to myself that very evening, I have found the answer to my problems. I did not know what the problem was. I did not care what the problem was. I had found the answer. I have a memory of walking up to a grown man who was walking his dog, putting my arm around his shoulder, looking him in the eye and saying, "Get bent." I don't know what that means tonight. It was the ability to put my arm around a grown man's shoulder, look him in the eye and say, "Get bent." That's what alcohol gave me. That's the freedom that alcohol gave me. That's the spiritual awakening, the spiritual experience that alcohol gave to me. Now, I'm 5 feet 9 inches tall tonight. When I was 9, I was a lot shorter. I don't imagine that I actually walked up to a grown man and put my arm around his shoulder. It's just geometrically challenging. That's the memory I took away from alcohol. Later that very same evening, I threw up in my sleeping bag. I was staying at my cousin's house, so as to not get caught, my cousin wouldn't let me let his mother clean my sleeping bag. So we kind of scraped out the vomit, and I slept there for a week. Oh, it's not that bad. Everybody's depressed suddenly, right? Like, oh, 6 donuts and a hot dog later, and you're like, I can't sleep in my vomit. No, try it. Have another hot dog. This might be your night. The first night it's wet, but you're drunk. By the second night it's drying off. By the third night it's flaking off. And by the end of the week you barely remember vomiting there. The interesting thing to me is that the memory I took away was not that I slept in my vomit for a week, but that I walked up to a grown man and said, "Get bent." That's the power of alcohol for me. Alcohol for me was so powerful that on Friday afternoon we would drive into West Philadelphia. We would buy a case of beer at the DeFlippo beer distributorship in West Philadelphia. 4 white suburban kids in a not stolen, because it belonged to the mother of the driver, but certainly taken without permission, which some would call stolen. Sticklers. No one was licensed to drive, but that again is that's a thing. It doesn't matter to everybody. So an unlicensed driver in a stolen car buying underage alcohol, and once that beer was in the trunk, I just felt better. I could breathe. I didn't have to have a beer. I had to have access to a beer. That's a spiritual experience. That is a spiritual awakening. The whole rest of the day, I feel better. Just knowing there's 8 Colt 45s with my name on it. And that's the way it went. And I didn't drink for very long. I drank for 7 years, start to finish. And I'm stretching it from drink to drink. Had I known I was going to end up safe, sane, and sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, I would have drank more. Really, I would have punched a cop, and I would have robbed a bank. But I didn't know I was going to end up here. I didn't know. Every drink I ever took relieved fear, anxiety, and self-obsession. And every drink I ever took created fear, anxiety, and self-obsession. Because every drink I ever took both relaxed me and loosened me up and scared me because I was relaxed and loosened up. God only knows what I'll do now. And I mean that. God only knows. And that's the way I drank. You know, I understand that this is a big book group. I'm a firm believer in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It is, to me, the basic text of our program. I have been through and taken many men and women through the first 103 pages, through the 12 steps as described in the big book. I mark my membership, my sobriety on that line at the beginning of More About Alcoholism, where it says that the idea that somehow, someday he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. That abnormal drinker that Bill's referring to in this paragraph is the very same drinker that he's referring to in the beginning of this paragraph, who he calls the real alcoholic. Okay? Real alcoholic is one way he describes a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Abnormal drinker. He describes the young person as nothing more than a mere potential alcoholic, but he continues on to say, but try and get them to see it. Many of them will have to suffer for decades before they're willing to accept that they belong in these chairs. That's been my experience. Not me, thank God. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous in early February of 1980. I had a hit-and-run accident with a Catholic priest, which I know seems rather weird, but remember. I guess you can't remember yet because you don't know the story. But I grew up an Irish, Italian, Catholic kid from Philadelphia. I'm not saying that if you work the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, you will end up an Orthodox Jew living in Jerusalem, but it has happened. In my experience of working with the new man, a great many things that we fear will happen when we take the third step never happen. The example I like to give is one of my previous sponsors, a man named Clint Hodges. If you ever get the opportunity to hear his, I would say, tape, but you may not know what that means. If you ever get to hear his recorded talk, Clint Hodges, listen to his talk. The man had a wonderful and a deep and a powerful message, and he was an amazing, sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he went, when he got sober in 1972, to his sponsor, Clancy, and he said, I'm afraid if I turn over my will and life to the care of God, God will make me a missionary in China. And Clancy, Clint had grown up a fundamental evangelical Christian in Montana. Not like a fundamental evangelical Christian on the East Coast, like crazy, crazy evangelical, right? Clint used to say the message that he learned as a child about sex was filthy and disgusting and should be saved for the one you love the most. He had a horrible experience growing up in that environment. And so he was fearful that God would make him an evangelical Christian and send him to China. And the beauty of Alcoholics Anonymous is in our heads, that's a real thing. That's a serious thing. So he went to his sponsor and he said to his sponsor, I'm afraid if I take this step, God is going to do this. And his sponsor, because his sponsor wasn't in Clint's head, was able to say, Clint, do you believe in God? And even more specifically, do you believe in Jesus? And he said, no. And his sponsor said, do you speak Chinese? And Clint said, no. And his sponsor said, why would God send you to be a missionary in China? Right? That just wouldn't make any sense. So what I'm saying to you tonight is someone actually did become an Orthodox Jew and moved to Jerusalem as a result of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. So be careful. So I came to Alcoholics Anonymous in early February 1980. I was 16 years old. I was in the middle of my junior year in high school. I had this hit-and-run accident with this Catholic priest. I made a brave and daring getaway. And he caught me. He found me. I'd gotten rid of the beer between my legs. I was high on Quaaludes, another thing that's like you got to Google. Between the drugs that I did that don't exist anymore and the drugs that didn't exist before I got here, it's amazing I got here at all. Anyway, I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I went to school that morning. I didn't smoke dope on the bus, which is something we did. Dope. What am I? Because I'd seen someone once throw up in their hands, and it's an ugly, horrible thing. I won't describe, but the trajectory, the force brings it right back at you. It's disgusting. And I didn't do that. And then I got to school, and I threw up in the hallway, which is not allowed in a Catholic boys' school. So I decided to go home. And as I was leaving school, I saw my friend Jimmy, and I said, Jimmy, anything you've got, I just need something. And he said, look, I've only got a little, and I need it for myself. So that's interesting, right? I'd gone from 15 minutes before being completely sure I was never going to use, and then, suddenly I just need something. And he says, I don't have enough. I only have enough for me. And I thought of that, when I learned later that day about lower companions, I thought Jimmy's a lower companion. Because I clearly needed it more than he did, and he wouldn't give it to me. Now, I saw Jimmy at our 10-year reunion 10 years later, and I was 10 years sober. And Jimmy asked me, as soon as he saw me, he said, are you still sober? I said, I am. He said, imagine if I had given you something that morning. He said, you may never have gone to AA. I was like, well, that's not the way I think about it. He thought he had saved my life. Which he may well have. Because maybe I just would have gone home and slept it off for a few hours and then gotten back at it and been one of the several people that died in my high school class. Because that's what we do. We give it one more shot and we die, or we lose our minds, or we kill someone else, and we affect our lives forever. This is a disease of inches and seconds, Norm Alpe used to say. Inches and seconds. Certainly that accident was. I'd sheared off the rear quarter panel of his car with the front quarter panel of my car. Inches and seconds from being a head-on collision. Well, I was adjusting the radio on the seat next to me because my parents didn't buy a radio when they bought the car. It was an orange Plymouth Duster. This car tells you a lot about my family. It was an orange Plymouth Duster. 1971 that they bought in 1972, so they saved a little money because it was the off-model year. No power steering would have cost $200. No radio, another $200. And they were only going to keep the car for 16 years. Do you know what $400 works out to over 16 years? They save like 25 cents a month. That car with no power steering was like a stress test every time you parked. With no radio, you could hear your heartbeat. You didn't even need to touch your vein. You could just count the beats because you were like... But I didn't go. I went home and I slept for a few hours and I was still uncomfortable and couldn't get it. And I called AA because my friend Lizanne had come to AA. Lizanne had come to AA 6 months earlier. I'd seen a change in Lizanne's eyes. So I called AA and I went, and a woman answered the phone. She said, "Alcoholics Anonymous, may we help you?" I said, "Yeah, how do you get into AA?" She said, "The door." I thought, we don't need that kind of attitude in our phone workers. She said, "If you get here by 12:30, I'll take you to a board meeting." I thought, a board meeting? I'm not even a member yet. What kind of shoddy organization are these people running? I got there at 2:30, and when I got to AA, there was about, it was the old 319 Club in Ardmore, Pennsylvania. It was above a tap room, and it was it was a one-store length, second floor, paneled with artistic AA slogans up and down both walls. Everything was coated in about 40 years of tar and nicotine, so it looked like a cave that was melting. It had the window shades. These are window shades, people. I'm not going to start pulling stuff apart, but believe me, they used to be. I don't think they do anymore. They used to snap at the bottom and they'd roll up. You find me an organization that puts the most important documents they've ever created on window shades. Find me a church that has the 10 Commandments on window shades. Find me a courthouse that has the U.S. Constitution on window shades. That's a special thing that we put these things on window shades. But there they were framed and they had their own little spotlights, and in green Gothic backlit lettering it said, "But for the grace of God." And I thought, but for the grace of God, what? I would have gotten hit by a bus on my way in here. I mean, there was 3 guys in AA when I got here. They were 150-year-old Russian guys from the Dannon yogurt commercials in the 70s. These guys could barely move, and then they ate Dannon yogurt and they could do backflips and cartwheels. Those guys were in AA, and I looked at them and I thought to myself, if I don't drink for as long as they've been alive, I can't have a drink for 134 years. I wasn't excited. They sat me down in the front of the room in a big picture window where people would sit and watch life go by. Gave me a cup of coffee, an addiction I'll thank them for forever. I'm not really addicted to coffee. I just drink it so as to not get a headache. I don't have to drink it until noon. But up until noon, it's a choice. A choice I make every day, but a choice nonetheless. They sat me down, and every guy that came into the room came up, sat with me, talked for a while, wrote out his name and his number on a card. Many wrote "call anytime." Gave the card to me, said "call anytime." Shake my hand with this hand, give me the card with that hand, look me in the eye and say, "You feel free to call me anytime." I do that. I give out my card. I have cards. I know it's ancient. People laughed at me. And last week I was speaking in Oslo, Norway. They were like, "You have a card?" They just wanted to see it. Right? I write "call anytime." I do it because that's what was done for me. I want to give back what was given to me. And the second reason I do it is because I know they're never going to call. certainly not going to call in the, this story changed over the years, because it used to be, what I meant when I said this was calling time meant calling the house. Calling when I called, if I ever called, when I thought they weren't going to be home. People weren't walking around with their phones. The phone was attached to the house. You want to take the phone with you, you've got to take the whole house with you. Right? A mobile phone in those days was the long cord that stretched into the laundry room, so your parents couldn't hear what you were talking about. That was a mobile phone. Right? One guy took my number. The next day he called me. He called in the afternoon and he said, hey Chris, how are you? I said, I'm okay. I didn't, I'm a little nervous now. But I didn't say that. He said, how'd you like to go to an AA meeting tonight? I said, sure. I didn't want to go to an AA meeting. I wanted to say, man, I went to AA yesterday. I got to go to AA 2 days in a row. But that's the clincher for me. I don't know how it would have gone if it hadn't happened this way, but this is the way it happened. He called me. I take guys' numbers. I call them. I don't call them forever. That's called stalking. I don't threaten them if they don't want to get sober. That's called, I don't know what, but it's not legal. But I call and I invite them to a meeting or two. I call to let them know, because you know what? It's really hard to call a complete stranger that you just met. That's why I drank, so I wouldn't have to call a complete stranger. Right? I would rather be beaten with a baseball bat than have to call a complete stranger. So he called me. He picked me up. He brought me to that meeting, and it was at that meeting. My dear friend Scott Redmond of blessed memory, another great, remember that name? Look that name up. He's a great AA speaker who passed away a number of years ago. Scott used to say alcoholism is contagious. We catch it through our ears. And I did. I didn't come to Alcoholics Anonymous because I was a real alcoholic. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous because Lizanne was a real alcoholic. Lizanne was the one that drank the way I wanted to drink. We drank in a park mainly. If I drank here, I woke up here. Trace back to my feet, stand me up, and that's where I've been drinking. She got movement on her drinking. She'd wake up in Ohio, in New York City. I don't want to think about the horrors that may have been inflicted on a 15, 16-year-old girl wandering around the Northeast in the late 1970s in a blackout. But from where I sat, it looked exciting. So when she got sober, I noticed that. And when this all happened to me, I noticed that, and I went to AA. And that first night, everyone introduced themselves. The second night, the Paola Young People's Groups, everyone in the room introduced themselves as an alcoholic, except for Paul, who was sitting next to me and must have noticed how uncomfortable I looked. He just said, my name is Paul, and I said, my name is Chris. And by the end of that meeting, after listening to you speak for an hour, I was running around saying, I'm an alcoholic. If what's wrong with you is what's wrong with me, if based on how you said you feel and how you drink and what happens to you when you drink and why you drink, then I'm alcoholic, which, believe me, in my family, having alcoholism is like going to Harvard. Really, if you come through the mental illnesses in my family with alcoholism, you're doing very well. I come from crazy people. Crazy people. And I'm not saying that flippantly. I'm not saying that pejoratively. Mental illness is a horrible way to be sick. It's a misunderstood. It's a miscalculated. It's a mistreated. We don't treat broken legs the way we treat mental illness in this country. If we did, we wouldn't put casts on people. We'd just say, try not to bend it too often. So, there I was, and I've circled around that term now twice, and now I'm going to go right at it. I believe that we use the term real alcoholic as a club. I believe we beat people out of this program. If someone is lucky enough to get into a chair in this room, I believe our responsibility is to welcome them. To welcome them for as long as they feel they belong in this meeting. Okay? In my experience of almost 40 years as a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, Alcoholics is not being taken over by anything. Okay? Alcoholics Anonymous is strong. It is vital. The big book is in its purest form. One alcoholic working with another alcoholic in this book. This program will exist forever. If someone comes into this room and doesn't identify immediately to the degree that you feel they should as an alcoholic, walk away. Call me. Talk to your sponsor. Let them, give them a moment to breathe and become an alcoholic in this room. I don't care what the book says, and I know what the book says. Their job is to figure out if they're an alcoholic, and my job is to take them through the 12 steps. Okay? All of this is my opinion, of course. We have no authorities, right? Clearly states in the traditions, I'm not an authority on Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm the schmuck that finally gave up and stopped saying no to Ron. I'm the guy that finally figured out he's not going to take no for it. Like, living in another country isn't good enough for Ron. 2 oceans, 2 continents away is not sufficient reason for not being the Saturday night speaker at the Conscious Contact Group in Doylestown. The only way out is through. I learned that in Alcoholics Anonymous. I know he's not going to stop. He's just going to slow down now. He'll be back. Don't worry. He's going to visit my page again. Now he's got my phone number. But he'll wait a little while. But I want to say that again. When someone comes to Alcoholics Anonymous, it's hard enough to stay. It's really hard to stay here. This is a spiritual program of action. The action I'm supposed to take towards the newcomer, I'm supposed to welcome them. I was on the AA police. I am retired. It's not my job. If you read Facebook, AA is teetering on the edge. Really, it's been taken over by I don't know what derogatory terms I should use. No one wants to be here. No one was running around today going, you know what I'm going to do tonight? I'm going to spend like 3 hours in a Lutheran church. That's what I'm going to do tonight, because clubs, dancing, friendships, knitting, TV, not for me. I'm infiltrating the Lutheran church. I'm taking over the Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. I'm going to kill it. I am married to a non-alcoholic. Okay? Her interest in Alcoholics Anonymous is 0. My writing partner is non-alcoholic. His interest in Alcoholics Anonymous is 0. I bring my wife to the Atlanta group when I'm asked to speak there when we're visiting in the summers, right? And it's 2 10-minute speakers and then a main speaker. She listens to the 10-minute speakers. She listens to stories, every story, all of our stories, whoever it is, it doesn't matter. And we're laughing. He almost jumped off. My wife is horrified. I know a guy who once climbed over the railing of the Oakland Bay Bridge. He was about to jump into the San Francisco Bay, ending his life, when his mind said to him, nobody jumps off the Bay Bridge. People jump off the Golden Gate Bridge. And he thought, nobody jumps off this bridge. They jump off that bridge. And he climbed back over the railing and made his way across town, and something happened on the way, and he didn't jump off the Golden Gate Bridge. Now that to me is God, miracle, amazing, alcoholism, the alcoholic mind at work. To my wife, that is mental illness. That is a person on very shaky ground. That is a person that should not tell that story at a social event or with a prospective partner. Right? I wish that were my story. Don't you? Don't you wish you'd been the guy that was over the rail of the Oakland Bay Bridge and climbed back and made your way across town and were somehow struck with the idea that you wanted to live instead of die? That's how I feel about that story. She thinks that guy is, thank God he's not drooling. Right? No one's trying to take over alcoholics. I promise you. And as long as an alcoholic, and I'm an alcoholic, and I'm sure there are many alcoholics here, has a big book, we will survive and we will grow and we will provide recovery to the person who walks through that door. We have the answer. That is a very powerful position. Not the answer. We have an answer. If they don't want our answer, that's great. You know what? That's what the book says. It doesn't say you're going to die a horrible alcoholic death if you don't come to us. It says perhaps there's another way for you. And if there is, so be it. Good luck. And I mean that wholeheartedly. It's not easy to stay here. And if you don't want to stay, you don't have to stay. This is not a cult. Okay? You don't have to stay because you're here tonight. We'd like you to stay. And we are going to express that. We are going to endeavor to keep you here. We may follow you out to the parking lot and ask you if you'd like to go to another meeting tomorrow. We may thrust our phone number at you. We may try and get your phone number from you. We may ask you to eat one of those hot dogs. We may describe one of those donuts in spiritual terms that you have heretofore reserved for actual spiritual experiences. That we may do. But it is only because we are so happy that we don't have to die of alcoholism that we want to give this message to you. When Bill and Bob were sitting with AA number 3, they wanted to know if he wanted to get sober. Not because they wanted a notch in their belt, and not because they wanted to not waste their time working with a guy that didn't want it. Because if he doesn't, they said to him, we've got to move on to the next guy. We've got to find that. It's not like, hey man, I know how to work the steps and don't waste my time if you're not serious about this. It's that I need to help someone who wants to be helped because there's a lot of people that do. It's not about me. It's not about my step work and how wonderful my step work is. And it's not, it is a program of action, but ultimately a spiritual experience has to manifest. I stopped drinking, as I said, in early February 1980, and I became active at Alcoholics Anonymous. And that group that Paul took me to became my home group, and Paul became my sponsor. And I was sober here in the Philadelphia area for a number of years, and a couple of years, and then I moved down to Florida for a few years, and was, thank God I've always fallen into groups of action, and that focused on the big book. Young people's groups that were just full of action, full of frenetic, like let's set it up and tear it down and set it up again. Why not? We've got a half an hour. But no one said in these churches. So what? Let's put them away and take them back out. Let's make the coffee, throw it away, make the coffee again. Yeah, why not? can have 2 coffee commitments. The coffee we drink and the coffee we don't drink. I love that young people's energy, whether it's manifest in a young people's group or just in any group. I mean, sometimes it's not a young person that has that energy, We just wanted, this is amazing that this finally happened for us. And we want this to happen for somebody else. I'll just finish the thought that I started like 5 minutes ago. It's not a cult. Right? It's not a cult because not only do we try and keep you away from your family, we insist you have a relationship with your family. We don't care about what you say happened in your family. We heal relationships, or we do our part. It's not about, well, he's a fucking asshole. So what? That wasn't the question. That's your father. That's your mother. I didn't want to have a relationship with those people. They ruined my life. I can report to you that through the several times steps left me in a position where I was able to attend to both of my parents at the end of their lives. Clear, clean, filled with love and service. And thank God for many years before their deaths. Not always. It wasn't easy. It's not easy. Those aren't the easy relationships. It's a lot easier to be to be kind to the bus stop. The guy at the bus stop, that's easy. Sometimes even like someone serving you, But a family member, a sibling, a parent, that's difficult. But we insist. We insist. So we don't want to take you from your family. We want you to heal your relationship with your family, which may seem to you to be the worst of the 2 options. And we won't take your money. We just won't take it. We won't take it. If you come here and you stay here and you become a millionaire and you decide you want to send General Service $1 million, you know what they'll say? No. No. You kind of like send it in the cat's name, the kid's name. It used to be $3,000. I think it's gone up. But we don't want your money. We want your money in the basket. Right? When I got here 40 years ago, it was $1 in the basket. But 40 years ago, we know what bread costs. We know what hot dogs cost. We know it. Right? So it's not $1 anymore. But we don't want your money. So this thing and this process, I'm not gonna, first of all, my time is nearly done. I'm not gonna take you through the steps. Nothing would be worse now than if I said, okay, in March of 1980, we've all been in that meeting, right? Like, oh my God. He's suddenly gonna go chronological. His time is up, and he's in 1980. Rolling into the summer of 1980. I'm not going to take you through the steps because you have the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous too, and they even told you if you don't, we used to say if you can't afford it, steal it. We don't even make you steal it anymore. They're willing to give it to you. I would take one just to see if they're actually telling the truth. Give it to someone else. Push them on this one. The book. Get a sponsor. We don't want you to get a sponsor so that we want you to get a sponsor because it's a voice outside of your head because a sponsor. Right? When I called Paul, that second day Paul called me, but on day 3 or day 4, I don't know if it was that, I think it was the next Wednesday night, driving in the back of Dan Macon. Dan was this old guy that picked us up. They had already picked Paul up, and then he picked me up, and he did it every week. And riding in the back of Dan's Volkswagen Bug, over the roar of that unique sound of a Volkswagen Beetle engine, I whispered to Paul, because God forbid Dan should hear me, will you be my sponsor? And he said what many sponsors say, I have to ask my sponsor. And he came back to me and said, I will. I'll be your sponsor. That was the manifestation of attempting to manifest a relationship with a power greater than myself. Not that Paul was a power greater than myself, but that Paul and I together were a power greater than me. For the first time in maybe forever, I had turned from the inside
to the outside consciously and sought something outside of myself. That was the beginning of the road which many, many years later ended me up an Orthodox Jew living in Jerusalem. That's not going to be your experience, I can almost promise you. But what I hope for you is that you continue to have a spiritual experience. Not because I want you to believe in God, and not because God wants you to believe in God, but because from my experience, it's the most open, it's the most spectacular, it's the most potential, is to just be open to something. Calling Paul was great, but I couldn't build 40 years of spiritual experience on calling Paul. Or even calling my sponsor. Because when I need God, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. When I need a power greater than myself, when I need to take an action that is not going to cause me harm, it is often an inconvenient time to speak to another human being. And there's magic here. There's spirit here. Right? Alcohol is not called spirits by accident. Right? That's what Dr. Young, when Bill Wilson wrote him a thank you note. Bill was amazing. Okay, I know a lot of people are like, I had a girlfriend. Yeah, I guess he had a girlfriend. Great. I'm not suggesting that as a way of being in a marriage. But Bill was a stockbroker that was like a spiritual guy. I don't know many stockbrokers that are writing thank you notes to Swiss psychologists for something they had done decades before. Right? And Bob was amazing in his own right? They both went out of their, right? What do they say? If Bill had founded AA by himself, it would be franchised. And if Bob had founded it by himself, it would have never left Akron. So it's together. It's this two. It's the same two that me and Paul were two. It's the same two that me and any one of the people I sponsor, or you and any one of the people you sponsor, or you and your sponsor. It's that two where it all just kind of, anything after the two is like, who knows what it's going to be. And yes, there's a lot of actions we can take, but it has to manifest. It's not an action. It's not just action. It doesn't say, as a result of taking these actions, we try to practice these principles. It says, as a result of spiritual awakening, it requires us to have a spiritual awakening. And the spiritual awakening, in my experience, puts us beyond simple action. If I have a complaint with those that I don't like the derogatory terms, and certainly there's no such thing as an AA Nazi. There's no such thing as a step Nazi. Nazis are a specific thing at a specific time, and they weren't working spiritual principles. They weren't gruff. They weren't insistent. And they weren't working the 12 steps. And I don't know, whatever. I don't want to use a term in particular, but I want to say that though we want to latch on to action because that's what we can control, that's what we can hold, ultimately it has to manifest in a spiritual experience, a spiritual awakening. It doesn't say we let this book discipline us through the 12 steps and we get disciplined by showing up early and staying late. It doesn't say fellowship will discipline us. It doesn't say having a home group will discipline us. It doesn't say following sponsor direction will discipline us. It says God will discipline us in this manner that we've been shown. I don't know if you don't believe in God and you're grousing at my use of the word God because I look like a religious person. There was a famous rabbi in Israel who said to a secular man one day, he said, the God that you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. And I believe that's true for me tonight. The God that, if you're sitting there going, if he says God one more goddamn time. I want to say, and I want to say again, clearly, the God that you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. I have a very specific set of actions that I have to follow as a religious person. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about getting free from the obsession to drink. I'm talking about manifesting this program so we can live full, rich, authentic lives and not be a slave to alcoholic addiction. Right? It says that we get a daily reprieve here based on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Now, for decades, if you would ask me what that meant, I would have said, that means I get a daily reprieve as long as I'm in fit spiritual condition. That's not what it says. Because I can't dictate my spiritual condition, but I can dictate the maintenance of my spiritual condition, right? We have to leave this room clean. But clean is an abstract concept. So we break it down into actions. We put the chairs away. We sweep the floors. Perhaps we also mop. We clean up the kitchen. And the church is clean. But we don't just say, let's clean the church. We say, let's put the chairs away. Let's sweep. Let's mop. Let's clean out the sink. And then that will be. And that's what we're doing here. We're taking actions to manifest an experience. And thank God, in my experience, when we take these actions, that experience manifests. And that's really the secret and the beauty of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's what we have that the new person that just walked in here, or will walk in here tomorrow night, not knowing what we do, doesn't have. I didn't know on the 13th of February that on the 14th of February I could stay clean. And I could stay sober for the whole day. I didn't know that I could not pick up a drink. In my experience, I always picked up a drink. And it was in meeting Paul and meeting all of you that I learned that there was some other truth in the world. I didn't know that I didn't have to live in fear. I didn't know that I didn't have to live with the bedevilments that we talk about on page 52. I didn't know that living without fear of economic insecurity was possible. I didn't know I could be honest. I didn't know if I could. I started to say it earlier, and I don't think I actually said it. I had an amazing day today. I had a horrible, difficult day. My niece is in a mental health crisis, and it was a very hard thing to walk through with my sister and brother-in-law, and with my niece and my other niece. But I learned here to show up. I learned here to be present. I learned here to take care of what needs to be taken care of, and that I did. But I also, when Shabbat ended and I could pick up my phone again, I called Paul. I'm still in phone contact with Paul for the last 5 or so years. And I invited him to be here tonight, though he couldn't make it because he's out of the country right now. But I got to say thank you one more time. He says I don't have to say thank you, but I have to say thank you. I owe a debt to Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous gave me my life. And gave me a life that I never knew I could. We talk about this idea, and then I'll stop, I promise. Beyond our wildest dreams. Not our wildest dreams. If I got my wildest dreams, I would have a lifetime supply of Marlboro and a 1980 Camaro. I don't smoke anymore, and I'd be driving a 39-year-old car. That was as big as it got when I got here. Anything you want, man. Anything you want. Lifetime supply of Marlboro and a brand new Camaro. I didn't get my wildest dreams, and you won't either. You'll get beyond your wildest dreams. Think of the most crazy thing you could possibly think of, something beyond that you can't see, or it wouldn't be beyond. That's where we're talking. That's the territory we're talking about. I wouldn't have known to ask for the life I have. I wouldn't have known how to ask for the life I've had. I had to walk through it step by step, day by day, until it was finally mine. Thank you.
All right. Yisrael, thank you so much for coming here and sharing that incredible message of hope with us, with our group tonight. One more round of applause there. couple of quick announcements and we'll get out of here. I know we're already past. We could always use some help cleaning up. We could use help cleaning up the kitchen. We could use help breaking